Hey guys, tonight we descend into the scorching heart of Persia's holy fire, where purity is law and sleep is optional. You think you've had a long day? Wait until you spend a night in a Zoroastrian fire temple, somewhere in the arid silence of ancient Persia. The moon is high, the stars sharp and endless above the plateau, and the air smells faintly of burnt sandalwood and something metallic, like warm coins. You're standing barefoot at the threshold of the Atash Behram, the most sacred of fire temples. Your clothes? Loose white cotton robe, because only white touches the divine. Your hair? Covered, tied back, or you risk shedding impurity like a plague. You glance around, expecting company, maybe a welcoming voice. Nope. The priest by the door just blinks at you slowly and points inside. The first thing you feel is heat. Not like a sauna or a sunny afternoon, but something deeper. The fire isn't just lit, it's alive. It hums, crackles with rhythm, as if it remembers things you don't. There's a sense that this flame has outlived empires, kings, and possibly even logic. This is a tar, sacred fire, and it does not appreciate tourists. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step forward and feel the floor's grainy coolness, packed earth smoothed by generations of bare feet. The temple walls close in slightly, thick with plaster and ancient frescoes, all dimly visible in the flickering orange glow. The only sound, fire, and your breathing, which is suddenly too loud. You cough and immediately regret it. A junior priest appears from behind a hanging curtain, eyes narrowing, nostrils flaring. He points at your mouth, then at the door, then back at your mouth. You've violated the first rule, no speaking near the flame. In Zoroastrianism, words have power. Bad words, even more so. Saying something impure near the holy fire could metaphorically feed it the wrong energy. Fire is the mouth of truth. It hears you, it remembers. So now before you even finish exhaling, you're being guided, more like nudged, toward a side room. This is the Hall of Silence, where newcomers like you learn to shut up. It's just you and a single bowl of ash in the corner. The priest gestures for you to smear some on your lips. You do. It tastes like cold barbecue and regret. You'll be spending the next hour meditating and practicing silent breathing. Don't worry, you'll fail at that too. But let's pause for a second, because here's the historical nugget of the evening. Zoroastrian fire temples were designed with layers of holiness. The outer courtyard was for commoners, inner chambers for priests. The innermost sanctum held the fire itself, burning 24/7, tended only by modes, ritual specialists. That flame, some were said to burn for centuries, even surviving invasions, and they were fed 5 times a day, not with oil, but with clean, dry wood only handled by purified hands. You, my friend, do not have those hands yet. And here's a weird bit of trivia. Ancient Zoroastrians believed that even shadows could carry impurity. That's why light was controlled carefully within the temple. Flickering torches weren't just for aesthetics. They were moral spotlights. Your body must not cast a shadow upon sacred objects. Think of it like the ancient Persian version of don't cross the laser beams. You try to stand still in the corner, feet slightly apart, hands folded like you've seen in those illustrated manuscripts, except your nose itches, and you're sweating from places you didn't even know had sweat glands. You shift your weight and, the floor creaks. The priest pops his head back in. No words, just judgmental eyebrows. You nod apologetically and vow to breathe more quietly. But here's the kicker. Historians still argue whether these fire temples were primarily religious sanctuaries or early forms of community hygiene centres. Some even suggest they were proto-hospitals, given how obsessed they were with purification. The line between physical cleanliness and spiritual virtue was razor thin. If you were clean, you were godly. If you had a cold, possessed probably. The hours crawl by. You think about asking for water, but remember the silence rule and your rapidly drying mouth. You eye the ash bowl, maybe don't. Eventually the priest reappears and gestures again. No words, of course. He leads you into the central hall toward the main altar. It glows in steady orange ripples. You feel it before you see it fully. The eternal flame rests atop a black stone pedestal. It's beautiful. It's intimidating. It looks like it could burn through your dreams. Suddenly you feel very, very small. You've brushed your teeth with sand, walked barefoot through incense dust, and had sacred ash on your lips. But none of that prepares you for the sheer presence of this fire. It's not just light, it's a memory engine, a god on earth, a celestial inbox, and now it's your job to make sure it doesn't go out. Ever. You haven't even made it past midnight. You arrive barefoot, cloaked in white, and the fire temple breathes smoke and sulphur, thick ribbons of it curling through the air like slow-motion curses. Every breath scorches slightly at the back of your throat. You try not to cough again. The flame is holy after all, and you're pretty sure you already earned one demerit back in the Hall of Silence. Better not push your luck. The robe you're wearing, it's called a sudra, and it's made of fine white cotton, itchy in all the wrong places and far too thin for this drafty stone interior. But that's the point. White symbolises spiritual cleanliness. Comfort, however, is not a consideration. You catch your reflection in a polished bronze tray set into the wall. Pale, nervous, with hair tied up and hidden beneath your padyab, the ritual head covering. Congratulations, you now officially look like an extremely anxious celestial intern. You try to walk forward, quietly. The floor is smooth but dusty, the kind of clean that doesn't come from scrubbing but from being untouched. No footsteps, no modern grime, no breadcrumbs of the outside world. It's as if the temple has rejected time itself, clinging only to ritual and fire. The room narrows, thick stone columns support the high ceiling, which disappears into shadow. You pass under a beam carved with Faravahar wings, those Zoroastrian symbols with a human figure sprouting eagle feathers, equal parts guardian angel and cosmic cheerleader. The flame glows ahead, behind a silver grate pulsing like a heartbeat. You think, maybe I'll sit down. You're wrong. One of the white-robed priests, their garments cleaner and far more intimidating than yours, tilts his head slightly. His expression seems calm, but his eyes are doing all the shouting. You realise you've stepped on the wrong side of an invisible purity boundary. Again. He raises a hand and points, not toward the fire. No, toward the corner. Again. You backtrack like a cat caught on a kitchen counter. Here's the thing no one warns you about in those history podcasts. Fire temples weren't just religious hotspots. They were performance spaces. Every movement was ritual. Every silence was loaded. You were being watched, not for your talent, but for your impurity. And speaking of impurity, you see it now, etched into the walls in delicate lines of gold and charcoal ink. The Gathas, ancient Zoroastrian hymns believed to have been composed by Zoroaster himself. They float along the stone like prayers fossilized into architecture. The script is beautiful but also haunting. You can't read it, obviously, it's Avestan, a dead liturgical language that even priests barely understand without a cheat sheet. But the mood is clear. Purity is not a suggestion. It's a threat with consequences. You shuffle to a spot near the door and sit on your heels. Every movement has to be deliberate. Don't slouch. Don't breathe through your mouth. Don't stretch your legs. You're sweating again, and the smoke is making your eyes sting, but you hold still. Like a sacred statue. Like a well-behaved ghost. Here's a mainstream historical fact to keep in mind while you're suffering in respectful silence. Zoroastrianism was the dominant religion of the Persian empires for over 1,000 years, from the Achaemenids through the Sassanids. Fire was its beating heart, and the temples were built around that idea, literally. The fire was the centre of everything, morally, physically, cosmically. So when you're sitting here, aching and dizzy and mildly on fire yourself, you're participating in a religious practice older than Christianity, Islam, and possibly your desire to ever volunteer for anything again. Suddenly, someone behind you sneezes, a sharp "cha," followed by a mortified silence. The room tenses. You glance over. The culprit, a younger priest in training, looks horrified. Another priest glides over, silent as a disappointed librarian. He whispers something inaudible, then gestures toward a side door. The sneezer bows deeply, head lowered, and walks out. He won't return for hours, maybe ever. Sneezing near the sacred flame is considered a serious breach of purity. Fun fringe fact. Zoroastrians believed that sneezes expelled not just air, but invisible evil spirits. A sneeze near fire? That's like doing shots of demon juice in front of an altar. So the rule wasn't just about noise, it was cosmological sanitation. You're learning now that silence here is not passive. It's a performance of respect, of discipline. Even your thoughts feel too loud. You wonder if that's by design. Historians still argue whether the elaborate rules of fire temple behavior were created to uphold spiritual values or as a method of social control. Some suggest the entire setup may have been a way for religious elites to maintain power, an eternal flame that required an eternal priesthood. After all, if only the purified could tend the fire, and purification took a lifetime, guess who stayed in charge? You notice your legs are starting to tingle with pins and needles. You shift slightly. A priest coughs, just once. The sound is soft, but it says everything. You stop moving. Minutes stretch like hours. The fire pops. Someone somewhere begins a chant, soft and rhythmic. It echoes faintly from another room, like waves on a stone shore. You focus on the fire. Its center burns blue, licked with orange at the edges. You start to feel its rhythm. Not just hear it, but almost understand it. Your eyes close just for a second. You aren't tired. You're devout. That's your excuse. You open them again immediately. No one seems to have noticed. Or maybe they did. You don't know anymore. The smoke is curling through the beams and everything smells like cedar and tension. You're only 2 hours in. You're watched. Always. The silence may feel thick and sacred, but don't be fooled. It's perforated with eyes. The fire temple breathes like a beast and you are the intruder. You shift your weight slightly, just enough to relieve the creeping numbness in your right foot, and instantly, you feel it. The gaze. There's no dramatic music, no spotlight, just the soft rustle of linen robes as a priest glides along the edge of the chamber, pretending to sweep the floor. He's not sweeping, he's watching. You. This isn't paranoia, it's protocol. The Purity Patrol doesn't wear a badge or carry a scroll. They wear white robes, like everyone else. That's what makes it worse. You never know who's about to spot your impurity, because everyone is responsible for guarding the flame. Everyone is deputized in the eyes of Ahura Mazda, the wise lord. If you scratch your nose too hard, fidget with your robe, or heaven forbid yawn without covering your mouth, someone will see. Someone will report, and you'll be rinsing your soul with sacred ash before you can even finish yawning. You glance at the flame. It's still alive, still perfect, still judging. A senior priest approaches. He doesn't speak. He doesn't need to. He simply gestures, very slightly, at your hands. You look down and realize with a jolt of panic that your fingertips are smudged with the tiniest trace of soot. Not holy ash, just soot. And that's a problem. Because in the world of the fire temple, soot is contamination. Ash is sacred. The difference is subtle, invisible, maddening, and absolutely critical. Ash is what remains when fire consumes pure offerings. Soot is what forms when fire devours something impure. Your fingers say, I touch something unworthy. You don't even know when. You're escorted, not harshly, but firmly, into a side room. Again. This one has no fire. Just a marble basin carved like a giant scallop shell, and a stone shelf holding what looks like a bowl of chalk and a stiff bristled brush. You know the drill. It's cleansing time. Historical fact incoming. Zoroastrians practiced Bereshnum, a 9-night purification ritual so intense it makes modern detox trends look like spa weekends. Participants had to wash in ritualized sequences with water that had been filtered through specific sand while priests recited sacred verses. For minor infractions like yours, a quick dry rub with sanctified ash and a brushing of the skin, all while meditating on your inner darkness. Still not exactly a treat. You dip the brush into the powder and scrub lightly at your fingertips. It stings just a little. The bristles are coarse, like horsehair. Your hands look cleaner now, but also rawer. You glance up and catch your own reflection in a copper mirror nailed to the wall. You look bleached, inside and out. Fun fringe tidbit. There are ancient records of nose inspectors, priests trained to sniff out impurity. Actual people whose job it was to smell whether someone had followed purification rules. Some scholars doubt the literal truth of this, but if you ever wondered what a spiritual TSA might have looked like in 500 BCE, this is probably it. Back in the main chamber, you're allowed to kneel closer to the flame, but still behind the silver grate. You keep your hands visible, resting them flat on your thighs like everyone else. You don't blink for too long. You try not to breathe too loud. You definitely don't move. And yet, you still feel like you're failing. It's like trying to play chess blindfolded while being judged by the sun. Historians still argue whether the priesthood's scrutiny was about maintaining true spiritual sanctity, or simply about control. Some suggest that Zoroastrian priests developed increasingly complex purity codes precisely because they were unverifiable. If impurity is invisible and omnipresent, then fear becomes the leash. The flame never sleeps. Neither does your anxiety. You watch as another novice, probably someone newer than you, bless his nervous heart, stands too fast and knocks over a tiny wooden offering bowl. The bowl rolls once, twice, then bumps softly into the edge of the fire enclosure. You could hear a pin drop. A silence louder than noise spreads through the room. The novice freezes. One priest turns, then another. One walks over, lifts the bowl, holds it up in both hands, and then bows. The gesture isn't for the novice. It's for the flame. Then, and only then, he sets the bowl down with reverent care and motions for the offender to follow him out. Another cleansing. Possibly an apology ritual involving incense and a 3-hour lamentation chant. You're not entirely sure, but you are entirely determined not to follow him. You settle deeper into your kneel, muscles ache. Your toes are numb, your lower back is staging a rebellion. But you stay still, because now you understand. The flame is everything, and the people who guard it, they are its nervous system. You are the bacteria in the bloodstream. Someone behind you coughs. Not a full-body bark like a sick toddler, just a tiny restrained puff. A priest looks over, gives a subtle nod. The cougher rises, bows, and leaves. No drama, just consequences. You think about coughing, just to see what happens. You decide against it. You're thirsty. Of course you're thirsty. You've been kneeling in front of a sacred furnace for what feels like an entire minor dynasty. The smoke has turned your mouth into a parchment scroll, your throat into a desert wind tunnel, and just over there, see it? A polished ceramic jug glistening faintly in the flickering firelight, nestled beside a set of copper ladles. Salvation? Nope. It's a trap. You look around. No one else is moving toward it, not even the priests. In fact, they seem to orbit the jug like it's radioactive. You watch as one approaches, pauses, then performs an elaborate hand-washing gesture, using not the jug, but a smaller vessel nested beside it. Then returns to the flame. No one drinks. Because here's the catch. That water isn't for you. It's not for anyone's thirst. It's for purification. And only that. You touch it with your lips. You defile it. That jug contains Zor-Ab, water that has been ritually sanctified and designated solely for cleansing hands before approaching the fire. Drink it. That's like gargling with holy oil and spitting it on the altar. Instant spiritual misdemeanor. Possibly a full-on heresy. Your lips are cracking now. You feel the tiny sting of dryness along the inside of your cheeks. A bead of sweat from your forehead trickles down your nose, mocking your misery. You imagine water, cold, clear, gulpable. Then you imagine being exiled to the outer courtyard for desecrating sacred fluids. The image is vivid enough to kill the urge, mostly. Here's a solid historical anchor. In Zoroastrianism, the elements, fire, water, earth, and air, were considered inherently pure. But the human body? A walking impurity bomb. That's why anything sacred like fire or water had to be protected from bodily contamination. Priests went to extraordinary lengths to avoid even letting their breath touch the flame. That jug isn't a refreshment station. It's a barrier between divinity and your messy mortal form. And the fringe detail? Some fire temples employed special animals, often dogs, for ritual purity checks. The Sagdid, literally dog sight ritual, involved bringing a sacred dog into proximity with a corpse to detect demonic contamination. Dogs were believed to have the ability to sense spiritual impurity. So if you thought ancient Persia didn't have service animals, think again. Back to your thirst. A priest approaches and hands you a folded cloth. You accept it, unsure. He gestures toward the side wall. There's a small copper bowl resting on a pedestal, next to a sand basin. You shuffle over. This apparently is your consolation prize. A chance to rinse your hands and dab your lips. Not drink, just dab. The water is cool, but controlled. One splash, one cloth, then back to your seat. You can't help but feel slightly betrayed. Somewhere in your brain, a modern instinct still thinks, this is a temple, it's sacred, it's supposed to be kind. But the fire temple doesn't deal in comfort. It deals in purity, and purity is exhausting. Historians still debate whether the extreme emphasis on ritual cleanliness in Zoroastrian temples was unique, or just a particularly intense version of what many ancient religions practiced. Some argue it was a reaction to the harsh environmental realities of Persia, dust, decay, drought, transformed into metaphysical frameworks. Others see it as a precursor to religious legalism found in later Abrahamic faiths. But either way, the result is the same. You're now deeply aware of just how gross your body is. Back near the flame, another ceremony begins. You aren't invited to participate. You're still too new, too impure, too recently soot-fingered. But you're allowed to watch. The priests move in practiced loops around the fire, chanting softly in Avestan. They lift clean wood pieces with silver tongs, never touching them directly. Each movement is deliberate, precise, even beautiful. They bow before the flame like it's a monarch, a living deity with the memory of 1,000 generations. And then you see something strange. One of the priests pauses, kneels, and sprinkles a powder, white, maybe lime or ash, into the flame. It sizzles briefly, releasing a puff of smoke that smells faintly of citrus and spice. The others respond with synchronized gestures. Later, you'll learn that these powders are often symbolic offerings, representations of the 5 senses, or of cleansing thoughts. But in the moment, it feels like alchemy. One priest, perhaps noticing your attention, turns and locks eyes with you. He raises a single eyebrow. It's the Zoroastrian version of, yes, this is supposed to be confusing. You lower your eyes and return to your breath, shallow and smoke-filtered. Minutes pass, or hours. Time here stretches and bends, warped by heat and chanting. You lose track. The only rhythm is your heartbeat and the pulse of the flame. Then someone finally does it. A new arrival maybe, less trained, less terrified. He steps forward, dips a ladle into the sacred jug, and raises it to his lips. A soundless wave passes through the temple. No one screams, no one rushes him. But 4 priests converge instantly. One takes the ladle, another guides the offender away. The third picks up a bell and rings it, once sharply. The fourth begins a chant you've never heard before. Low, mournful, relentless. The man doesn't resist. He looks like he already knows. You watch, wide-eyed. That could have been you. Might still be you if the ash on your fingers fades again, or if your foot cramps and twitches toward the fire. The flame, meanwhile, crackles calmly. It doesn't punish. It doesn't forgive. It just burns. Before the sun even thinks about rising, you're already kneeling in the outer chamber again, bleary-eyed and aching in places you didn't know had nerves. The stars are still out, cold and ancient, blinking indifferently through the temple's skylight. The fire never went out. Of course it didn't. It hasn't in hundreds of years. But you nearly nodded off, and you're about to pay for it. A priest gestures you forward, then points toward a basin and a cloth. No words, just expectation. You shuffle over, bend awkwardly, and begin to wash your hands, your arms, your face. The water is shockingly cold, and the cloth is rough, like someone blessed it with a cheese grater. And then, with barely a pause to catch your breath, you're handed a second cloth. This one already dusted with a fine grey powder. Sacred ash. Not optional. You're now on floor scrubbing duty, and your mop is literally a rag in your own body weight. You're not just cleaning the floor, you're purifying it, burnishing the temple's bones with a substance both symbolic and mildly abrasive. Welcome to the divine janitorial squad. The method is absurdly specific. Circles, always clockwise, always starting from the outermost corner and working inward toward the flame. No talking, no humming, no sighing. And if you think scrub faster to finish sooner, think again. The priests are watching for precision, not speed. This is worship, not a chore chart. Here's your morning historical nugget. In Zoroastrian cosmology, cleanliness was more than physical upkeep. It was spiritual armor. Every impurity cleaned from the environment was a blow against the forces of Druge. Falsehood, chaos, decay. Dirt wasn't just dirty. It was evil, literally. So when you're down there on your hands and knees, elbow deep in holy ash, you're technically fighting darkness itself. Or at least that's what you tell yourself to get through it. By your third pass around a support column, your knees are beginning to feel like they're filing a formal complaint. The stone floor may be sacred, but it has zero regard for your patellas. You pause, just for a second, to adjust your robe and sit back on your heels. Instantly a junior priest sweeps past you, gives a short nod downward. Not mean, not angry. Just reminding you the ash doesn't rest, and neither should you. Fun fringe tidbit. Zoroastrian priests were known to use balsam sticks, thin bundles of twigs used in ritual prayer, to sweep not just physical dust but metaphorical negativity from the air. In fact, some ceremonies involved waving these twigs while chanting, creating a sort of spiritual dusting that mirrored your current scrubbing. You're basically the human version of that now, without the chanting. Eventually, as the darkest hour bleeds toward dawn, you're allowed to stop. Not rest, mind you, just stop. You sit back against a cool stone wall, the ash now forming a fine layer over your hands, forearms, and probably your lungs. You feel less like a person and more like a gently used statue. One of the priests brings you a small bundle of cloth. Inside it, breakfast, sort of. A slice of dried flatbread, so thin it may have started life as papyrus, and a palmful of dates. No water, of course, just the food. And even this must be eaten properly. Seated, silent, facing away from the flame but never with your back to it. Everything here is choreography. You chew slowly. The dates are sticky and sweet. The bread a dry whisper on your tongue. You've never appreciated food this much, or hated it more. Historians still argue whether meals in fire temples were primarily symbolic gestures, echoes of ancient sacrifice rituals, or pragmatic necessities for long rituals. Some believe that even eating was considered a chance to digest impurity and transform it into virtue. Others say that's giving ancient diets too much spiritual credit. Either way, you eat in reverent silence, crumbs balanced like guilt on your robe. You glance around. No one else is talking either. Even the priests eat in synchronized solitude. One priest chews while maintaining perfect posture. He looks like a statue designed by a particularly rigid god. Another finishes his meal and proceeds to wash his hands in the sacred sand basin, then pats them dry with a cloth that gets immediately taken away and burned. Yes, burned. Because that's how seriously they take the idea of leftover impurity. As you wipe your fingers and bow slightly toward the flame, you catch a sliver of sunrise creeping through a crack in the ceiling. The first light of morning. You might think this would signal rest. You'd be wrong. Instead, the arrival of dawn marks the beginning of a new purification cycle. You're told, with a single nod, to prepare the outer sanctum, a courtyard used for lesser rituals and visitors not yet worthy of the inner flame. It's cooler out there, at least. The stone underfoot is smoother, the breeze welcome. You start laying out clean mats, all facing the fire temple's main entrance. The alignment must be perfect, each corner squared, each line true. A priest occasionally walks by and silently straightens what you thought was straight. You try not to take it personally. Your arms are sore, your knees are shot, you haven't slept. You've eaten 3 dates and a postage stamp of bread. But something weird is happening. You're still here, and even weirder, you haven't messed up in the last 30 minutes. No soot, no sneezing, no shadow on flame incidents. The priests glance your way now, not with suspicion, but with something bordering on acknowledgement. Not a smile, of course. That would be heretical, but maybe a slightly softer grimace. You arrange the last mat, bow slightly to the entrance, and stand as straight as your spine allows. The flame still burns, and so miraculously do you. You thought unwashed hair was harmless? Oh, sweet summer pilgrim. In the fire temples of ancient Persia, your scalp is a battleground, and stray hairs are tiny little insurgents of impurity. You're in the grooming chamber now, a small, low-ceilinged room that smells like smoke, dried herbs, and just a pinch of silent judgment. There are no mirrors. Vanity has no seat at this table. But there are combs, rows of them, laid out like surgical tools. Long ones, short ones, some made of bone, others carved from smooth cedar. None of them look inviting. One of the priests hands you a dull-bladed trimming knife, and you feel a subtle wave of dread. He motions for you to kneel in front of a copper bowl. Time for your scalp inspection. Here's the deal. Zoroastrian ritual law takes hair seriously. Very seriously. Because hair sheds. And once it's no longer part of your body, it becomes spiritually suspect. If it ends up in the sacred flame, you've introduced pollution into a divine circuit. That's like backwashing into a holy hot tub. You may never spiritually recover. So the fire temple has a solution. Preemptive purity. Every strand must be accounted for, and anything loose must be removed. Hence, the head check. The priest begins combing through your hair with slow, methodical strokes. You sit absolutely still, your spine straight, and your soul quietly pleading. Every time the comb snags, you flinch slightly, not from pain, but from anxiety. If even one stray strand falls to the ground instead of into the bowl, you'll be back in the purification room so fast your sandals won't have time to flop. And here's your scholarly debate of the hour. Historians still argue whether these hair rituals were driven by actual religious belief or were part of a broader cultural fixation on order and containment. Ancient Persians were deeply invested in separating clean from unclean, sacred from profane, so some scholars believe the hair rules were part of a larger strategy to discipline the body. Others argue it's just about fire safety and hygiene. After all, no one likes burnt hair. Your turn ends with a gentle pat on the head and a nod. Success. You're still worthy of the flame. Then it's your job to do it yourself. You're handed a smaller comb and a metal bowl and instructed through gestures to check your beard, or in your case, the area where a beard might someday be if the temple doesn't kill you first. You sit cross-legged and begin to comb, slowly, reverently. Any loose hairs go into the bowl. You resist the urge to scratch your nose with the handle. That would definitely count as impure. Here's a bizarre historical tidbit to lighten your load. Some Zoroastrians were known to burn trimmed hair and nails in specific fire pits, designated just for that purpose. These weren't temple fires, they were impurity bonfires, because hair and nail clippings, once separated from the body, were believed to attract demons. And let's face it, if you were a demon shopping for chaos, someone's forgotten eyebrow hair seems like the perfect invitation. You finish your inspection and return the bowl to a side altar, where another priest, wearing gloves no less, gathers the contents and walks them out of the room with the solemnity of a burial procession. You don't ask where it's going. You don't want to know. And now, clean of hair sins and with your scalp sufficiently aired out, you're ready for the next step. Clothing review. That's right. Your robe is checked too. A priest waves you into a light-drenched chamber with slatted walls that let in the soft glow of morning. He hands you a second robe, identical to the first in cut, colour and discomfort, and instructs you to change behind a screen. You do. The old robe is folded neatly and handed back. You're not sure what will happen to it, but it's probably destined for ritual burning. Again, impurity must not linger. You glance down at yourself. White linen, perfectly creased, no threads loose, no folds wrinkled. You look like a celestial intern on his second day. At least you've improved. You return to the main chamber, stepping carefully. You're lighter now. Not just because of the robe or the combing, but because for the first time since you arrived, you know what's expected of you. And in a place like this, that's a luxury. You find your spot near the wall and kneel again. The fire dances ahead, its tendrils reaching skyward in slow, mesmerizing swirls. No one speaks. The only sound is the fire's whisper, the occasional brush of linen, and the nearly silent breath of 100 people trying to stay pure. You close your eyes briefly, just long enough to feel the warmth on your eyelids, to let it settle into your bones. You've survived hair inspection. You've mastered the ash mop. You haven't sneezed, yawned, or stepped out of line in a while. Maybe you belong here after all, until your stomach growls, loudly. The priest closest to you glances over. He doesn't move, doesn't speak, just raises a single eyebrow. You sigh, internally of course, so close. The fire's been burning for centuries, and now it's your turn to keep it alive. No pressure or anything. You've been summoned to the Atashka, the inner sanctum where the holiest flame resides, tucked within a stone chamber sealed off from the outside world. There's no door, just layers of draped curtains, each embroidered with protective symbols, each heavier than the last. You step through them slowly, feeling their weight trail across your shoulders like whispers from 1,000 nervous priests. The heat hits you immediately. It's not the toasty warmth of a fireplace or the sun's casual embrace. It's intense, dry, and oddly personal, like standing in front of a truth you've been avoiding your whole life. You're not alone. A senior priest is already there, seated cross-legged on a low platform beside the flame. His hands rest calmly on his knees, his eyes half-lidded, as if communing with something only he can hear. Without looking up, he gestures for you to kneel beside him. You obey. The fire itself sits in a wide bronze brazier. raised slightly on a carved pedestal. It doesn't flicker like a campfire. It rolls, pulses, folds in on itself. Its centre burns a pale, uncanny blue. The outer flames are deeper orange with edges that curl like flower petals. It doesn't move randomly. It moves like it remembers something. This is Atar, sacred fire, the physical embodiment of purity and truth, and you're supposed to tend to it. Carefully, reverently, without screwing it up. The priest hands you a pair of silver tongs. They're warm to the touch, etched with delicate symbols, stars, birds, the Faravahar wings. He nods toward a small pile of dry wood stacked on a polished marble tray. The wood is immaculate. No bark, no splinters, no bugs. It's been purified, stored and inspected by 3 different people before you even laid eyes on it. You pick up a piece, gently, and bring it toward the flame. He stops you with a whisper. Breathe through your nose. And that's when you realize your breath can pollute the flame. If you exhale too hard while leaning in, even the purest offering becomes tainted. You turn your head slightly, hold your breath, and carefully lay the wood onto the fire. It catches immediately, no smoke, no sizzle, just perfect, quiet ignition. Like the fire recognizes its own. You sit back, exhale slowly through your nose, and resist the urge to cry. From the heat, obviously, and the pressure. Probably not from the overwhelming sense that you're one mistake away from spiritual exile. Here's your historical fact. Some Zoroastrian fires were kept burning for hundreds of years, through invasions, migrations, even when temples were destroyed. Fire was transferred carefully, often in special covered vessels, and escorted across deserts under guard. One famous fire, the Atash Behram of Udvada, is said to have been burning continuously since the 8th century CE. These weren't symbolic flames. These were living institutions, and a quirky tidbit. There are records of priests who wore mouth veils, fine white cloths tied over the mouth and nose, when tending the fire. This wasn't about disease control. It was about preventing even a single errant droplet of spit from reaching the sacred flame. So yes, you're basically breathing like a ninja, for religious reasons. The senior priest gestures again. This time, he holds out a shallow bronze tray with what looks like incense. You can't tell. It's ground fine, almost like flour, and smells faintly of sandalwood and mint. He nods toward the brazier. You sprinkle it in. The reaction is immediate. No flames, just a soft white plume of smoke that curls upward in a single column. It doesn't drift. It rises straight like a thread being pulled into the sky. The priest murmurs something in Avestan. You repeat the words clumsily. He corrects you gently. You try again. This time it flows better. A little chant, a little smoke, a little bit of your soul tugged forward and held up for review. Historians still argue whether fire worship in Zoroastrianism was ever truly literal. Some believe the fire was a stand-in for spiritual illumination, not an object of worship itself. Others claim that ancient Persian rituals did blur the line between veneration and deification, especially when the fire was given food-like offerings and housed in what were essentially divine apartments. Either way, the fire mattered. A lot. Your next task is simply this. Watch. Watch the fire. Watch its colour, its movement, the way the smoke curls. You're now one of the eyes of the temple. If anything looks off, if the colour dims, if the shape shifts unnaturally, you're expected to signal the priests. The priest beside you taps the floor once with the handle of his tongs. You do the same. You're now officially a guardian of the sacred flame. You feel proud, also mildly terrified. The room grows hotter, your clothes cling to your back, your knees ache again, but you don't move. You don't breathe too hard. You just stare into the fire and try to stay present. But here's the weirdest part. You start to feel something. Not mystical enlightenment, not yet, but something. A shift in your breathing, a strange alignment between your heartbeat and the fire's pulse. You begin to time your blinks between flare-ups. You notice that the heat on your left cheek is stronger than your right. You feel like you're part of a breathing ritual machine. You don't speak. You barely think. You just tend. Until the priest taps your shoulder. Time's up. You bow low, back out of the chamber slowly, and pass through the curtain layers without turning your back on the flame. It's still burning. Of course it is. Light must fall evenly. You'd never think something so simple, your own shadow, could be a threat to spiritual harmony. And yet, here you are, carefully sidestepping your own silhouette as if it's radioactive. You're back in the main chamber now, newly purified and emboldened by your time beside the fire. But that doesn't mean you're free to relax, because in the fire temple even shadows are impure, or at least they're treated that way. If your shadow touches the flame or its sacred implements, you may as well have spit in the eye of the cosmos. So now you walk slowly, deliberately, always checking the floor. The fire casts a golden aura, steady and bright, and you move within it like a cautious marionette, twisting your steps to avoid any stray flickers of yourself landing where they shouldn't. And the light, it's managed. There are no windows in the inner chamber, just strategically placed skylights and fire catchers. The flame itself is the sole source of illumination, and it's surrounded by polished metal shields that reflect the glow evenly across the space. No harsh shadows, no sudden dark spots. The temple has become a kind of softbox for the sacred. Here's your historical anchor. Zoroastrians believed the flame was pure, but vulnerable. It needed protection, not just from physical pollutants like soot or spit, but from spiritual contaminants. And the idea that a person's shadow, being tied to the mortal and fallible body, could defile the flame, totally serious. You'll even find references in Zoroastrian texts warning against letting the shadow of the impure fall upon the sacred light. So now you've become a dancer in a slow-motion ritual ballet, moving through golden corridors and smoke-tinted air, always angling yourself so that your outline avoids the pedestal, the priests and the fire itself. It's like trying to walk across a spotlight stage without interrupting the performance, and you are the performance. A priest passes behind you, gliding noiselessly, his own body moving in perfect harmony with the flame's cast light. You try to imitate his steps, curving your path around a column to keep your feet in line with the brighter spots of the floor. But it's exhausting. More exhausting than you expect. Because you're not just watching your body, you're watching your absence, your echo. And here's a fringe detail you didn't see coming. Ancient Zoroastrians had entire rituals designed to remove shadow impurity. Not your average exorcism, but acts of re-cleansing spaces where impure shadows had touched, especially during solar eclipses, which were considered especially dangerous times for the spiritual health of the world. Some temples even paused rituals during eclipses, fearing that the distorted light would create uncontrolled spiritual leaks. You wonder briefly if anyone has ever had their shadow touch the fire and lived to tell the tale. You're not brave enough to ask. As you crouch near the incense shelf, realigning a tray that was tilted a few degrees off-center, you notice the angle of light shifting ever so slightly. The sun's position is beginning to change, and with it, the flame's shadow geometry. Which means you'll need to adjust your movements again. You're beginning to understand something. This entire temple is a machine. A sacred, silent, living machine. And every single person inside it is a moving part. You're not just obeying rules for the sake of obedience. You're helping maintain a fragile cosmic balance. Your shadow isn't yours. Your breath isn't yours. Not even your footsteps belong to you anymore. Everything is choreographed in deference to the flame. Historians still argue whether the emphasis on shadows and angles in Zoroastrian temples was theological or architectural. Some suggest it was a way to train acolytes in discipline, force them to become hyper-aware of their bodies and movements. Others think it was simply an extension of the broader Persian obsession with symmetry and control. Whatever the origin, the outcome is the same. You've never moved so carefully in your life. And then, despite your best efforts, it happens. You shift your weight. The hem of your robe flicks out, and for a fraction of a second, just a flicker, your shadow grazes the base of the flame's pedestal. You freeze. No one gasps. No one screams. But the senior priest nearby looks up. His eyes lock with yours. He doesn't speak. He simply tilts his head. You bow, instantly, deeply, and step back. He nods once and motions toward the side hall. Another purification. You sigh, quietly, then follow. You return 10 minutes later, hands recleansed, robe adjusted, soul slightly bruised. No one says anything. The fire still burns, the pedestal still stands, but your confidence, singed. You kneel again, this time further back, away from the flame's edge, safer, wiser, more humble. There's a certain quiet triumph in surviving this long. You've managed ash scrubbing, hair checks, chanting, robe inspections, and now the geometry of your own shadow. You begin to realize that every part of this place is designed to remind you of one simple, uncomfortable truth. You are not clean. You must become clean, over and over, hour by hour, breath by breath, and somewhere inside you, between the aches and the incense, a strange thought arises. Maybe there's something beautiful about that. You're starving, not the I skipped lunch kind of hungry. This is deeper. A gnawing, hollow ache that seems to reach into your spine and whisper, "Remember pancakes?" But here in the fire temple, dinner isn't about satisfaction. It's not even really about nutrition. It's about ritual. And like everything else in this sanctum of sacred micromanagement, eating is a ceremony, not a meal. You're guided into the Chinvat Hall, a quiet chamber lit by low, flame-fed lanterns and lined with floor mats. No tables, no chairs, just the stone floor, the mats, and a faint scent of cumin and cedar ash. You take your seat, cross-legged, back straight, facing east. You notice everyone is arranged in perfect symmetry, like chess pieces waiting for the game to begin. And in a way, it is a game where the rules are spiritual, the penalties eternal, and the prize is not upsetting the flame. A priest enters carrying a tray, on it 2 small clay bowls. He walks the row and hands one to each participant, including you. You peer inside. It's goat stew. Probably. Something dark and oily, floating in an herbal broth that smells dignified. A second bowl follows, this one filled with barley flatcakes, thin and barely flexible. Nothing else. You're ravenous, but you don't eat. Yet. First, the priest kneels at the head of the room and begins a chant in Avestan. The same prayer you heard during fire offerings, now repurposed for food. The sacred and the mundane? Same thing here. You follow suit, whispering the words you've learned phonetically. Your stomach growls mid-verse, and you wonder if that counts as impurity. Probably. Everything else does. Finally, the priest finishes. He raises both hands and signals the beginning of the meal. You don't just shovel stew into your face. No, that's not how this works. You reach for the bread with your right hand only. Your left is reserved for unclean tasks. You tear a piece gently, silently. No crumbs allowed on the mat. You dip it once into the stew, then bring it to your mouth. Your fingers can't touch your lips. Your posture must remain upright. You chew. It tastes fine. Not spicy, not rich, but clean. A bit of onion. Maybe fenugreek. The meat is soft, stringy. The broth is cool by now, lukewarm if you're being generous. But that doesn't matter. It's fuel for the ritual. Flavour is optional. Here's your historical insight. Meals in Zoroastrian ritual spaces weren't about indulgence. They were about alignment. Eating with proper form was an act of discipline, a reinforcement of order. In a religion where cosmic struggle plays out through every gesture, even a bite of bread is a spiritual position. To eat carelessly is to aid the forces of Druj, chaos and untruth. To eat reverently, that's a strike for Asha, the truth, and a fringe detail. Some scholars believe that priests monitored the chewing of initiates seriously. There are ancient records that describe the importance of silent chewing, of keeping one's mouth closed so breath wouldn't mingle with food particles and risk releasing impurity into the air. So yeah, no slurping, no sighing, no second helpings. Halfway through your meal, the person beside you coughs. Just a tiny, polite cough. Not near the flame, not near the food tray. Still, 2 priests appear. One asks something in Avestan. The other gently removes their bowls. The individual bows, then leaves. Presumably off to cleanse, cough again, and reflect on their esophageal betrayal. You chew slower now. Historians still argue whether this extreme level of control was sustainable in daily Zoroastrian practice, or if it was reserved only for temple rituals. Some evidence suggests that in everyday Persian households, the rules were looser. Blessings before meals, yes, but not this choreographed dinner theatre. Others believe that elite priestly families lived this way full-time, shaping not just rituals but meals, marriages, and even sleep schedules around sacred flame purity. You glance up and catch the eyes of the senior priest. He gives you the faintest nod. You bow slightly in return, then lift the final piece of bread to your mouth. You eat it slowly, reverently. There's a strange satisfaction in it. Not fullness, but participation. You've eaten not just food, but correctly. And here, that's better than delicious. Once everyone is done, the bowls are placed carefully in a line. A priest collects them with gloved hands, transferring each to a secondary room. You don't get to see what happens there, but you've heard whispered speculation, scrubbing, ash dusting, even fire purging for accidental spillage. Then, as if synchronized by invisible cues, the group stands, one by one, in silence. You do the same, and that's it. Dinner is over. No burping, no conversation, no dessert. Just ritual digestion. Your stomach still wants more. But your mind? It's surprisingly at ease. You didn't defile anything. You didn't spill. You didn't accidentally inhale in the wrong direction. This might be your first clean success since arriving. You return to your mat near the outer sanctum and sit quietly. Outside, the sun has finally set. The stars are returning. The wind murmurs against the stone walls, soft and rhythmic. Inside, the fire glows, steady, eternal. And you? You're not full, but you're getting used to that. Sleepy? Too bad, because here comes the midnight ablution. And no, it's not the spa experience you're picturing. You're roused from your sitting mat. Not gently, not cruelly, just efficiently. A priest taps your shoulder with the handle of a ceremonial staff. You blink up at him, briefly wondering if this is a dream. It isn't. He points toward a corridor lit with a pale bluish lantern. You know better than to speak, so you stand, bow, and follow. The hallway leads to a square, open-air chamber with no roof, open to the dark sky and the sharp bite of the wind. It's midnight, and the desert temperature has plummeted. Your teeth are already chattering, and the ceremony hasn't even begun. At the centre of the chamber is a pit of sand, fine, white, cold. Around it, a few bowls, some ash, and a set of small wooden rakes. There's no water in sight. This is the ritual bath, Persian fire temple style, and surprise, you won't be bathing in water, you'll be cleansing with sand. Historically, when water was scarce, or considered too sacred to waste on everyday washing, Zoroastrians developed a system of dry purification using earth. Sand, particularly fine white sand, was thought to absorb impurity and gently scuff away spiritual residue, kind of like exfoliating, but for your soul. The priest demonstrates, you kneel in the sand, rub it across your hands, arms, neck, even your face. The goal isn't scrubbing, it's contact. Slow, intentional, respectful. You begin dipping both hands into the sand. It's icy, silky, and somehow heavier than it should be. You coat your forearms, then lift small handfuls and let them fall across your shoulders. The grains cling to your robe, nest in the folds of your fabric, slip into your sleeves. You don't complain, you reach for the rake. It's short, with 3 teeth, and you use it to draw slow, deliberate lines in the sand around your knees. Not for art. This is symbolic containment. You're placing yourself in a purified zone, physically marking the space you've cleaned. It's your personal sacred circle. Mess it up, and you start again. And here's a curious fringe tidbit. Some fire temples recorded the use of demon traps, patterns raked into sand to ward off invisible malevolent forces. These geometric forms, often stars, concentric circles, or twisting lines, were believed to confuse or delay evil spirits long enough for them to be dispelled by prayer. Whether it worked, that's up for debate. But the temple floor now looks like a sacred Zen garden maintained by sleep-deprived monks. Once your cleansing circle is complete, you sit back on your heels and raise your hands, palms up. You hold them there, waiting. The priest pours a trickle of powdered ash into each of your palms. You rub it gently across your fingers, your wrists, your throat. You breathe it in. It smells of cedar, citrus, and something ancient, like time trapped in resin. Your skin is dry. Your robe is stiff with sand. Your face feels like it's been scrubbed with sacred chalk. But you're cleaner now, ritually at least. Historians still debate the extent to which these midnight rituals were followed by the average Zoroastrian, or whether they were restricted to the priesthood and elite initiates. Some believe the ceremonies were a holdover from older Indo-Iranian practices, absorbed and transformed by Zoroastrian theology into nightly soul maintenance. Others argue they were practical, scheduled at night when distractions were few, and purity could be protected until morning. Either way, you're now wide awake. Not refreshed, raw. You've been sanded down by a religion with zero tolerance for sleep drool or dream sweat. After your final sand sweep, the priest gestures you toward a low wall basin. There's water here, but you don't drink it. You dip your fingers in and flick droplets over your chest and shoulders. The motion is rhythmic, almost hypnotic. A flick, a breath, a prayer. Then comes the judgment. A younger priest, maybe 2 years older than you, maybe just blessed with a permanent frown, approaches holding a cloth and a torch. He walks around you slowly, inspecting the rake lines, the ash distribution, the consistency of your robe. You freeze. He leans in and, yes, this is real, smells your forearm. Apparently satisfied, he steps back, bows once and moves on. You're not sure if you passed or just didn't fail badly enough to matter. You're motioned back inside through the same blue-lit corridor and return to your mat. You sit, sand still clinging to your ankles and wrists. You're shivering, exhausted, and slightly annoyed at how spiritual cleansing is somehow 85% exfoliation. You think maybe now you'll sleep, but sleep isn't guaranteed. Because snoring, that's a whole other category of impurity. You lie back slowly, carefully, positioning yourself so your feet don't point toward the fire temple's inner sanctum. Another no-no. You pull your robe tighter, close your eyes, and try to quiet your mind. It doesn't work. The fire hums in your thoughts. The sand grits against your skin. Your body is tired, but your nerves are still playing musical chairs. Still, you try. And somewhere between the sacred geometry of midnight sand and the scent of ancient ash still caught in your breath, you begin to drift. Almost. Snoring isn't just annoying here, it's impure. And unfortunately you snore. Not that you meant to, not that you even remember it. But at some point, in the haze of post-midnight exhaustion, your body did what bodies do. It gave in. You exhaled just a little too heavily, and then again. And then your throat made that soft, unholy gargle. A sacred chamber meant for whispered prayers now echoes with your low, ragged rumble. It only lasts a few seconds. But seconds are enough. You're awoken not by fire or wrath or even shouting. You're awoken by the sandal. It's not thrown, it's not violent, it's used precisely. A tap. A firm, ceremonial thump to the shoulder with a flat-bottomed sandal, wielded by a junior priest whose face looks like it hasn't smiled since childhood. He doesn't speak. He doesn't have to. The message is clear. Clean your breath. You sit bolt upright, startled and instantly ashamed, brushing at your robe as though you can swat the impurity away like a bug. You nod deeply. The priest bows in return, then glides off, sandal in hand, seeking his next victim. You've just experienced one of the less-known but rigidly enforced temple practices, breath purity. See, breath is sacred in Zoroastrianism. Life enters through the breath. Prayer exits through the breath. And careless, unconscious breath, like a snore, is considered spiritually sloppy, especially if it happens while facing the sacred flame. Which, by the way, you were, of course. You stand, quietly mortified, and make your way to the purification chamber. Again. You're getting good at this part. Step in, ash to the lips, quick rinse of the hands, prayer under the breath, but not too loudly, and back to your mat. Fun fringe fact? There are ancient Zoroastrian texts that describe the dangers of dark breath. It was believed that breathing while angry, unclean, or in certain dream states could pollute the air around you. Some priests even held their breath during particularly delicate rituals, believing that the very air from their lungs could desecrate a flame or altar if their soul wasn't fully aligned. And yes, snoring counted. You settle back onto your mat, now hyper-aware of every breath. You practice inhaling softly, evenly. You try to hum quietly through your nose, a subtle vibrational rhythm to keep your airways open without veering into audible territory. It's like trying to fall asleep during a sleep study where failure earns you another date with the sandal. Around you, others sleep, if you can call it that. Most lie very still, breathing shallowly, hands resting neatly across their midsections, as if posing for a sacred fresco. One man is practically upright, sleeping while seated, neck perfectly aligned with his spine. You wonder if he's awake. You wonder if he's been awake the whole time. Here's your mainstream historical insight. Temples like these were never just about worship. They were schools of self-control. From movement to thought to breathing, fire temple life trained every part of you to submit to divine order. And that extended into sleep. Some sources suggest that initiates were evaluated on their posture even while resting, as a test of spiritual discipline. You lie there, eyes open, tracing the shadows on the ceiling. The fire's light flickers through a small skylight slit above you, painting soft golden shapes across the stone. You can hear your own heartbeat in your ears. You start to drift again, not sleep, just the pre-sleep float, that weightless state where thought becomes image. You picture the flame. It flickers in your mind's eye, that impossible orange-blue spiral. It hums. It knows. You remember how it moved like breath earlier, alive, intelligent. You wonder if it dreams. You wonder if you are part of its dream. And then, another snore. Not you this time. Somewhere across the room, a thick, wet snurk. You flinch. The sandal strikes again. A different priest this time, with expert aim. It's almost elegant. The offender groans softly, rolls onto their side, breathes deeply, but silently. There's something almost comical about it. A room full of adults, dressed in white, scattered across mats, each one terrified to snore. A midnight dormitory of spiritual anxiety. If you weren't so tired, you'd laugh. Historians still argue whether this rigid control of sleep behaviour was widespread or unique to certain fire temples. Some believe it was a later development, a sign of Zoroastrianism evolving from cosmic struggle into institutionalized surveillance. Others argue it's rooted in the dualism at the heart of the faith. Sleep, like everything else, was a battlefield between good and evil, order and chaos. Letting down your guard, even unconsciously, invited trouble. You close your eyes again, now curled slightly on your side with your head resting on the crook of your arm. You focus on your breathing, in, out, like the flame. Eventually your body yields, not to deep, dreamy sleep, but to something gentler, a half-sleep, a spiritual rest stop. Your body is still, your mind quiet. Your breath flows evenly, and no one has touched you with a sandal. Yet, you're inspected for lice. Again. It's still dark outside, though you've stopped checking. Time has melted into a loop of ritual and ash where hours don't tick. They hum. And now, your morning welcome committee is not breakfast or blessings, but a young priest holding a long, narrow comb and a flickering oil lamp. He gestures to you. You sigh quietly and kneel. The lice inspection is methodical. Head first, then neck, then arms, then bizarrely fingernails. Each one is examined, buffed, and scrubbed with a tiny brush. You sit still, not out of obedience anymore, but because you're too tired to resist. Besides, this is your new normal. You want to roll your eyes. You don't. Because in the fire temple, lice aren't just unpleasant. They're dangerous. Spiritually dangerous. Here's the historical backbone. Zoroastrians believed that lice, ticks, and other parasites were the breeding grounds of spiritual decay. These NASA creatures were thought to feed not just on blood, but on purity. Their presence indicated rot, an invasion of the sacred by the forces of Druge, the universal falsehood that Zoroaster preached against. And it wasn't just metaphorical. There are ancient texts prescribing the death penalty for knowingly bringing lice into sacred spaces. Sound harsh? Maybe. But when your religion is built around invisible warfare between good and evil, even a flea becomes a frontline threat. The priest uses a silver comb now. Yes, silver. Not just for its antibacterial properties, but because precious metals were thought to repel dark forces. The teeth of the comb are fine enough to pick up even invisible sins, you suspect. Your scalp is declared clear. For now. You're handed a small bowl of ash and expected to rub a pinch into your fingertips. Again. You've done this so many times that your skin smells like a fireplace. But hey, better ash than infested. Fun fringe detail, some ancient Zoroastrians kept purity dogs in their homes, animals whose job was not just companionship but to sniff out dead matter and potential contamination. These weren't pets. These were guardians of domestic holiness. Think of them as holy bloodhounds for impurity. You wonder if that's the origin of temple sandal patrols, just a different species of watchdog. Back in the main chamber, you kneel for prayer. You've started to develop a system. Weight on the left knee, rest the spine, hands folded like so, neck straight but not rigid. It's almost comfortable, if comfort now includes ash dust and a stiff robe. You glance around. The temple is quieter than usual. Morning rituals haven't started yet. No food, no chanting, just waiting. And then, a bell. One clear note, sharp and clean. A signal. Something has changed. The priests begin to form a line. Your motion to join them. You rise, dust off your robe, and take your place near the end. Everyone is facing the same way, toward the inner sanctum, toward the fire. This is no ordinary prayer cycle. The air feels heavier, charged. A soft chant begins at the front of the line, low and rhythmic. It flows backward through the row like water down a stone channel, and you catch the tail end just in time to join. You chant now automatically, syllables tumbling from your lips in a language you barely understand but have memorized like muscle. It's a calming rhythm, and for a moment you feel something strange, belonging. But don't get too cozy. Suddenly one of the priests turns, steps toward you, and motions you out of line. You freeze. He beckons again. You follow, nerves reignited. He points at your nails. Again. You look down. There it is. A speck of grime, maybe soot, maybe yesterday's barley crust. Doesn't matter. You're out. Historians still argue whether fire temple purity practices were grounded in theological consistency or evolved over time into obsessive rituals. Some scholars believe the nail inspection tradition was imported from older Indo-Iranian mourning rites. Others think it was a practical hygiene routine wrapped in spiritual packaging. But whatever the origin, the result is always the same. Clean hands, clean soul. Dirty hands, dirty everything. You're sent to re-cleanse. Again. This time the ritual includes a full hand scrub with ash and a surprisingly spicy-smelling root paste. Your hands tingle as you finish, the skin tight and raw. When you return, the line is gone. The prayer has ended. The flame flickers brighter than before. You kneel by the wall apart from the others. Not punished, but not elevated either. You're in ritual limbo. You focus on your breathing. You feel the ash under your nails. You resist the urge to scratch your scalp just in case. You are a creature composed of breath and rules now. Nothing else. And just when you think you've hit the bottom of your exhaustion, a single priest walks past and nods. Not at you, just in your direction. It's not forgiveness, not approval. But maybe, just maybe, it's progress. Body odour isn't impure, but covering it up is. That's right. Welcome to the aromatic paradox of temple life, where natural smells are spiritually neutral, but anything artificial, perfume, oil, even scented soap, could tip the scales toward moral disaster. So when you wake from your barely slept sandal-dodging pseudo-rest, smelling like goat stew and ancient anxiety, you're not supposed to fix it. You're supposed to accept it, or rather cover it, with sacred ash. You're guided silently to what's generously called the Fragrance Pavilion. It's not fragrant. It's a small side room with a sun slit and 3 low stools. On the floor rests a large clay pot of ash, warm grey, soft as flour. Soft. A priest gestures for you to sit. You do. Then he hands you a small brush and a shallow bowl. You already know what's next. Ash under the arms, ash across the chest, ash behind the ears. You don't scrub. It's not a cleaning ritual. This is deodorant, Fire Temple edition. And it's not supposed to smell nice. It's supposed to smell right. As in, ritually correct, cosmically aligned, approved by the sacred fire, and hopefully not offensive to the priest who keeps walking past and sniffing everyone like a suspicious librarian. Here's your historical anchor. Zoroastrians viewed artificial masking of natural scents as deceptive. The fire was believed to perceive not just smoke, but the aura of what burned around it. Covering up your natural odour was, in a sense, lying to the divine. The flame accepts honesty. It does not accept sandalwood perfume, so now your whole body smells like a mix of bonfire and basement. But you're compliant, you're purified, you're approved by flame. And weirdly, you're getting used to it. The priest checks your application, his glance brief, his nose twitching slightly. You pass. Fringe detail? Some ancient Zoroastrians believed the sacred ash carried protective properties beyond the temple. There are stories of warriors smearing ash before battle, not to blend in but to signal divine favour and protection. One bizarre tale involves ash being sprinkled on livestock to protect them from evil eye rot. We're talking spiritual for breezy. You leave the ash chamber and rejoin the day's rituals. The sky outside is turning that odd pre-dawn blue, a colour you're starting to associate more with cleansing than with peace. The temple is quiet. Quiet in that everyone is busy praying silently sort of way. You take your place near the outer wall and begin to chant. Not loudly, just under your breath. The words feel smoother now, familiar. You might not know their exact meaning, but you've learned their rhythm, their weight. Each syllable is a small, clean offering. A priest walks by, nods, and places a small pinch of saffron on your tongue. It's not for flavour, it's a symbol of light, of clarity. The taste blooms sharp and floral, cutting through your smoke-caked mouth. It's your reward for surviving a night, or a test. It's hard to tell anymore. Historians still debate how deeply ritual ash use penetrated everyday Zoroastrian life. Was it reserved for the temple, or was it a daily practice for the devout? Some texts suggest it was common in rural communities, while others describe it as a marker of priestly caste identity, a way to visually and olfactorily distinguish the sanctified from the merely pious. Either way, you now wear your ash like a second skin. But wearing it is one thing, living it is another. Because the next step isn't symbolic, it's maintenance. You're handed a small cloth pouch. Inside, more ash. You're told to carry it with you at all times. If you sneeze, ash to the mouth, too. If you touch something impure, say, a temple cat, ash to the fingers. If you feel a sinful thought coming on, ash to the chest. Yes, thought counts too. And this is where the fire temple takes a sharp turn into cosmic micromanagement, because here, the line between the physical and the spiritual doesn't blur. It vanishes. Your sweat, that's a message. Your smell, a broadcast, your internal monologue, a live feed straight to the divine. So now, when you feel frustrated or hungry or sleepy, you don't just suppress it, you ash it. You reach into your pouch and pat your heart like a nervous gambler, hoping to silence whatever impurity might be brewing. It's hard to say whether you feel cleaner or just numb. You walk the corridor now like a ghost with laundry duties. Your robe clings to you, your hands are dry and grey, you're one smear away from becoming a statue, but you haven't been corrected in hours. No sandals, no side-eye, no exile to the purification chamber. That's something. You step into the eastern wing and help set out bowls for the next meal, carefully aligned, rim to rim, like tiny moons orbiting a central fire. Your movements are precise now. You bow with ease. You chant without faltering. You smell sacred, smoky, ancient, and for the first time, someone new glances your way, hesitates, and follows your lead. You're no longer just surviving the fire temple, you're becoming part of it. Accidentally turned your back to the flame, even briefly. That's a multi-hour apology ritual, and yes, everyone noticed. You didn't mean to, of course. You were focused, too focused, on setting down a copper bowl during the morning incense ceremony, and your foot pivoted wrong. Just a half turn, just a sliver of shoulder twisting away from the flame. But in the fire temple, a sliver is a schism. The sacred fire must be faced, respected, acknowledged. Turning your back, even for a breath, even accidentally, is interpreted as spiritual negligence. It's like shrugging in the middle of a prayer or mooning the divine. The priest didn't yell. He didn't gesture. He simply rang a small handbell. Once. A sound like that doesn't need words. It echoes. You're escorted without ceremony to a smaller chamber off the eastern corridor, the Korshad Gar, or sun space. It's not a punishment cell, but it might as well be. It's lined with fire symbols, sun discs, radiant stars, the Faravaha figure looking stern even in profile. There's a single window slashing sunlight across the floor like a spotlight in a celestial courtroom. You kneel in the centre. A bowl of ash is placed before you. A small cup of water, non-drinkable, is set to the side. A priest lights a small flame in an iron dish and leaves it burning exactly 1 cubit away from your bowed head. And so begins the apology ritual you're to chant not dramatically, deliberately. You repeat a prayer that translates roughly to, "Let my ignorance be no offence to the flame. Let my body learn the shape of reverence." It's beautiful, if mildly humiliating. Here's the mainstream history hit. Zoroastrian rituals heavily emphasized directionality. Facing the fire or the sun was not optional. It was foundational. Even everyday prayers were oriented toward light, toward energy, toward truth. To turn away, even in a moment of distraction, was a symbolic shift away from Asher, the cosmic order. And cosmic order is kind of the whole point. So you sit, you chant, you breathe shallowly. The heat from the small flame radiates toward your face, reminding you constantly of its presence. And the ash? It's not for decoration. You dip your fingers into it after every recitation and press a small smudge onto your forehead. Over and over. By the third time, you can feel it drying, cracking. You resist the urge to wipe your brow. Somewhere between smudge number 7 and breath number 30, a thought sneaks in. This is ridiculous. And just as fast, it's followed by another. This is necessary. Fringe tidbit? In some older Zoroastrian texts, there's mention of a practice where those who turn their back on a sacred flame were required to sleep beside it for an entire night, facing it even while unconscious. No turning, no shifting, just one long ash-covered slumber of spiritual penance. It's unclear how often this was enforced, but it tells you something about the seriousness of spatial reverence. Your knees ache, your palms are gritty, but you keep chanting. After a time, maybe an hour, maybe 3, you hear footsteps. A priest enters silently, douses the small flame, and replaces the bowl of ash with a new one. You perform one final smudge, bow low, forehead to stone, and remain there. Only after the light shifts and you feel the temperature dip are you tapped gently on the shoulder. You're clear. When you return to the main chamber, it's like walking back into society after a minor exile. No one says anything, but a few heads tilt subtly as you pass. They know. You settle near the far wall, away from the central flame, and take your seat. You're not excluded, but you've been gently re-ranked. It will take time to regain your proximity privileges. Historians still argue whether these fire-facing rules were symbolic or power-maintaining. Some scholars see the directionality as a form of ritual control, an ever-visible reminder that all attention must flow toward the centre, the divine, the priestly authority. Others argue it was a deeply internalized theology, where facing the flame was akin to aligning one's soul with light. Either way, the consequences were real. You spend the next hour in silence, watching the fire from afar. You keep your body still, your shoulders square. You don't move unless someone signals you. You're the picture of penitence. And yet something stirs in you. Not guilt, not fear, but a strange, quiet pride. You broke the rules. You paid the price. You returned. You might never move quite the same way again. Every footstep now comes with a mental compass. Every gesture double-checked for alignment. You're not just aware of the flame, you're calibrated to it. And somewhere in the golden hush of the temple, the fire crackles, not loudly, not harshly, but just enough to let you know it remembers. The temple has one sandal, just one. It's not decorative, it's not symbolic. It is quite literally the sandal of correction, and by now, you and the sandal are on a first-name basis. It's made of thick leather, worn smooth along the edges, with a single strap that looks like it's seen generations of minor offences. No gold leaf, no embroidered holiness, just function. Pure, pragmatic, soft-souled retribution. You first encountered it when you snored. Then again, when you forgot to ash your hands before handling a prayer tray. And just now, the sandal reappeared when you, carelessly, foolishly, daydreamed during a call and response chant. You weren't sleeping. Not really. But your eyes drifted, your posture slouched, your lips moved out of sync. The priest monitoring the row caught it. There was a pause in the chant, a shuffle of linen robes, and then thump, a gentle but deliberate nudge to your thigh, a sandal tap. Not painful, but deeply effective. Because here's the secret. It's not about the pain, it's about the message. Zoroastrian fire temple life is about awareness, of space, of flame, of self. And the sandal, it's the instrument that breaks through the fog of thought, the static of wandering attention, and snaps you back into the sacred present. It's your spiritual alarm clock. Historical fact. Correction tools like the sandal were part of many ancient ritual systems, not just in Persia. In Zoroastrian tradition, discipline wasn't considered punishment, it was purification. The body needed constant reminders to serve the soul, and the sandal, just one more way to redirect the impure back toward Asher, the path of order and truth. And here's your fringe tidbit of the day. In some smaller temples there were designated sandal keepers, individuals, often junior priests or older initiates, whose only job was to walk silently and administer gentle correction. Their footsteps were so soft that their presence became mythic. In some texts, they're called the Whispers of Order. Sounds nice, until you get tapped in the ribs mid-prayer. After your latest sandal incident, you spend the rest of the chant hyper-aware. Your voice is steady, your hands are folded just right, your gaze fixed slightly downward, respectful but alert. You're determined not to give that thing another excuse to visit you, and as the chant ends, the priest monitoring your row glances your way and doesn't move. Victory. You settle into a period of quiet observation, watching as other initiates move through the temple. One of them, a younger novice with too much confidence and not enough ash on his robe, steps with a little too much bounce, not irreverent, just undisciplined. You see it before he does. A whisper of movement, a faint shift in the air. Thump. The sandal finds him. Light tap. Back of the calf. He straightens instantly. There's something strangely communal about it. The sandal isn't cruel. It isn't angry. It's a ritualized form of attention, a shared language. You all understand it now. You've been inducted into a secret society of sacred smacks. Historians still argue about the role of these small disciplinary acts. Some say they were designed to cultivate humility, to teach initiates that no one, regardless of rank or seniority, was above correction. Others suggest it created a culture of quiet fear, where obedience edged too close to repression. But no matter where they fall, scholars agree on one thing. It worked. People paid attention, they moved better, they breathed better, and let's be honest, no one likes getting tapped in front of the flame. After the chant, you're assigned to incense rotation. You carry a small bronze thurible, smoke rising in lazy tendrils, and walk the perimeter of the sanctum. Your steps are slow even. Your hands do not shake. Your rhythm is perfect. No sandals today. But you see others still learning. One stumbles slightly over a prayer mat. Another yawns without covering his mouth. And again, thump. Always with grace. Always with purpose. You realize the sandal is more than a correction. It's a compass. A reminder that the divine requires constant embodied awareness. You're not just tending fire, you're tending yourself. The day stretches on, tasks blur, ashes applied and reapplied, shadows shift. You remain in alignment, and the sandal, it stays away. You wonder if that's the real test, not just obedience, but internalization. Not fearing the sandal, but no longer needing it. And when you walk past it later, resting quietly on a low shelf near the purification basin, you don't flinch. You nod at it, respectfully. You finally meet the magus, not one of the junior priests or silent sandal bearers, but the magus, the high priest of the temple. He doesn't enter with fanfare. There's no horn, no procession, no flying eagle flapping behind him like some divine mascot. He just appears. You're in the outer sanctum preparing incense trays, lining the small brass pots with dried rose petals, bits of pine resin, and precisely measured chips of aromatic wood, when the entire room shifts. Not in sound, not in smell, in presence. The other priests freeze, not dramatically, more like they're holding their breath. You follow their gaze, and there he is. He walks slowly, but not because he's old. His steps are intentional, like each one weighs as much as a ritual. His robe is the same colour as yours, but the material looks softer, the weave finer. The edges are lined with the faintest shimmer of gold thread, subtle enough to miss, impossible to ignore. His face is pale in the firelight, clean-shaven, unreadable. Eyes dark and quiet. He glances once at the central flame and nods almost imperceptibly. Then he turns his gaze to the room, and it lands on you. Your stomach does a flip. You don't breathe. You're not sure if you should kneel, bow, or spontaneously combust. You settle for a deep, motionless incline of the head. He walks over. Each step feels like it takes a year. When he stops in front of you, you can hear the fire crackling behind him, and for a strange second it sounds almost amused. The magus doesn't speak. He just looks at you and smiles. Once. It's not wide. It's not warm. It's the kind of smile that knows things, that's seen things, that's burned things and blessed things and never once needed to explain itself. It chills you. And weirdly, it motivates you. Because in a place governed by silence and rules, where even your breath has to be purified before speaking, a single smile from the high priest is the equivalent of a cosmic thumbs up. It means something, or at least, it doesn't mean you're a disgrace. Here's your historical fact. The Magi were not just priests. They were philosophers, astronomers, advisors to kings. They were the custodians of Zoroastrian tradition, believed to be able to interpret omens, study celestial events, and keep ritual fire alive through political upheaval, cultural collapse, and personal failure. A magus wasn't chosen by popularity. He was forged through decades of discipline, years of silence, and a lifetime of not messing up the incense. And here's a fringe detail. Some ancient Persian texts suggest that the smile of a magus was considered a form of blessing, rarely given, never forced. It meant the flame had not only accepted your presence, it had acknowledged your potential. Some even believed it sealed your fate, marking you for a higher spiritual path whether you wanted it or not. You have no idea if that's what just happened. But after the smile, he moves on. He speaks a few words to another priest in a voice so low you feel it rather than hear it. Then he exits the way he came, quietly, without haste, like a thought returning to its source. The air shifts again. You breathe. The other priests resume their tasks. No one says anything, but you feel different. Not lighter, not yet, but less unworthy. The fire, of course, doesn't care. It crackles the same way. It dances with the same unblinking grace. It has no memory for your personal victories, but maybe it witnesses them. You kneel once more and finish preparing the incense. Your fingers don't shake this time. Your motions are smoother. You even catch yourself correcting someone else's tray alignment and doing it gently, with the kind of quiet authority you've absorbed through repetition and sandal avoidance. Later that evening, when the incense ceremony begins, you're assigned a place closer to the flame than ever before. You hold your tray like it's part of you, walk like the floor belongs to the sacred, and bow at the precise angle you practiced in your private hours. Your chant is strong, your gaze steady. You're not thinking about the magus's smile anymore. You're thinking about how to deserve it. Historians still puzzle over how magi were trained. Some believe they were born into priestly families and selected early, while others argue for a meritocratic system where the most devout slowly rose through decades of service. What's not in doubt is the reverence they commanded, not just for their rank but for their mastery of the seen and unseen. As the ceremony ends, you catch a glimpse of the magus again, just a silhouette, halfway down a corridor speaking to no one. The firelight behind him flickers like it's listening. You lower your head. You're not ready for another smile. Not yet. But someday, despite your scrubbed palms, your perfectly parted robe, your sacred ash deodorant and sandal-dodging finesse, the priests suspect impure thoughts. And now, it's time for confession. Not the loud, sobbing, dramatic kind you'd see in medieval paintings. No booths, no whips, just one dimly lit chamber, a small clay lamp, and a priest with a face carved from stillness. You're summoned just after evening chants, when the fire burns low and the temple echoes with fatigue. The priest gestures for you to follow. He doesn't say why, but you already know. He leads you to a chamber you haven't seen before. It's bare. Earth floor, chalky walls, a single cushion, and an oil lamp that throws shadows across your hands in the shape of forked flames. He gestures for you to sit, and then silence. He sits across from you, cross-legged, arms resting lightly on his knees. His eyes are open, but he doesn't look directly at you. He waits. This isn't questioning. This is invitation. You glance around the room for cues. There are none. No sacred ash. No altar. Just presence. Yours, his, and the weight of whatever you've brought in. So you speak. Quietly. Haltingly. You confess that you allowed your mind to wander during the third chant, that you envied the senior priest's perfectly clean robe, that, for a moment during incense duty, you thought about bread, not symbolic bread, actual bread, crusty, buttery, sinful. You say it out loud, and it sounds silly, but also honest. Because in the fire temple, impurity isn't always what you do, it's what you think. And you've had a lot of thoughts. Here's your historical nugget. Zoroastrianism treats mental purity as seriously as physical cleanliness. The religion's moral triad, good thoughts, good words, good deeds, puts thoughts at the top for a reason. According to ancient doctrine, impure thoughts attract druj, the spirit of deception and disorder. They're like spiritual kindling. Think enough wrong things, and you become a fire hazard. The priest doesn't interrupt, doesn't judge. At the end, he bows slightly and murmurs a word so soft it feels like a breeze on your cheek. You don't understand it, but you feel lighter. Then comes the ritual response. He hands you a small bundle wrapped in linen. Inside, a seed pod, dried and fragile, covered in fine black dust. It's a hauma seed, symbolic of both growth and memory. Your task? Carry it until dawn, as a reminder of your thoughts, of your confession, of your potential. You nod. Fringe detail, some ancient Zoroastrians believed that confession purified the soul through symbolic transference. The idea was that speaking your thoughts aloud made them real enough to be captured by the flame. In some temples, confessions were whispered directly toward a fire so that the sacred light could absorb and neutralize the darkness. You exit the chamber, clutching the seed. It crumbles slightly in your hand, like it knows your secrets now too. You tuck it into your sash. When you return to the sanctum, no one looks at you differently. No one even looks at you at all. But your steps feel straighter, your breath deeper. You feel like a room that's just been swept. Then the priest reappears, the same one who gave you the seed. He places a bowl before you, warm water, a cloth. You clean your hands, one more time, because the confession isn't over until you've physically acknowledged it. Historians still argue whether these thought purity rituals were widespread or rare, mystical side practices reserved for priestly elite. Some claim they were core to temple life, while others think they evolved from older, more animistic traditions that saw speech and thought as literal forces that could change the world around you. Whatever the origin, the effect is undeniable. You return to your mat, seed tucked, hands washed, thoughts named, and something in the fire seems calmer now. Or maybe it's just you, because the worst part of impurity isn't being found out. It's thinking you'll never be clean again. And tonight, you are. Your vocal cords are raw, you're still chanting. If your pitch falters, you must start over, in Avestan, with a cough. This is not the chanting you've grown used to. The gentle hums during offering, the soft echoes in sand-swept corners of the temple. No, this is the marathon chant, the all-night invocation that comes once every moon cycle. Lucky you, you've been deemed ready. Ready in temple terms means likely to survive, barely. You kneel with 12 others, robed in white, seated in a perfect circle around a low brazier. The fire burns modestly tonight. Less spectacle, more scrutiny. A priest steps to the centre, holds up an engraved wooden tablet, and nods. And then the chanting begins. The verses are ancient, older than any empire you've studied, older than the roads that led you here, maybe even older than guilt itself. You don't understand every word. Most priests don't. The Avestan language is a fossilized script, memorized more than comprehended. But the rhythm is the point. The sound is sacred. You open your mouth and join in. Hashem vohu. Your voice cracks. The next syllable gets caught in your throat. You swallow, try again. Vahishtem asti. Better, but not good enough. The priest's head tilts. Each verse is scored not just for accuracy but for purity of tone. Because in Zoroastrian belief, sound is more than communication. It's creation. Speaking wrong? That's injecting disorder into a fragile cosmos. Here's your historical anchor. Chanting was considered a spiritual function, not just a devotional act. Each correctly spoken line was thought to weave order into the universe. That's why even tiny vocal errors were corrected immediately, sometimes by repeating an entire passage from the start. Priests trained for decades to master intonation. For you, a beginner, this is trial by flame. One acolyte falters, a barely audible stutter on a long vowel. The priest steps forward, raises a hand. The group falls silent. Then, back to the beginning. All of it. You clench your jaw. Your throat is already tender, raw from hours of smoke and muttering, but you breathe in and start over. Hashem vohu. The cadence settles. You find a flow, like rowing a boat made of syllables. You lose track of time. Your body starts to sway. Not from reverence, from fatigue. The fire seems to flicker in rhythm with the chant, not metaphorically, actually. The shadows on the wall pulse with your syllables, rising and falling like the flame itself is inhaling your breath, judging your intent. And here's a fringe tidbit. Some fire temples place sacred stones beneath the chanting circle, porous rocks believed to record vibrations. According to oral tradition, These stones retained the purity of past chants and could train future initiates by echoing correct sound patterns. There's no real proof of this, but you swear the floor is humming under your knees. The priest brings you all water, but you don't drink. You rinse your mouth, swish gently, then spit into a sand basin. Drinking during the chant breaks purity. The sand, again, is a cleanser, not for your body, but for your sound. You try again. Ushta asti, ushta achme. It's almost trance-like. Your brain quiets. Your chest tightens, not with panic, but with effort. You forget what your own voice sounds like. You're just a conduit now, syllables passing through you like wind through a reed. Then you cough. You didn't mean to. It snuck up, smoke and dryness conspiring against your efforts. You stop. The priest looks over. No sandal this time. This is beyond sandal territory. He walks over, places a cool hand on your back and whispers, "Start again. Alone." You blink. Alone? The others pause. You nod, and so you begin. Your voice is hoarse, but clear. Hashem vohu vahishtem asti. Each word lands heavy, dense with meaning you don't fully grasp but feel pressing through your ribs. You finish the verse, then another, then 3. No one corrects you. When you finish, the priest offers a slight bow. You rejoin the group. Historians still argue whether Zoroastrian chants were meant for communal reinforcement or spiritual manifestation, whether the goal was bonding or cosmic engineering. Some suggest the practice was rooted in Indo-Aryan fire songs, passed down in breath and bone. Others argue it evolved with the priesthood, a test of will disguised as worship. You don't know which is true, but you know this. You are exhausted. You are proud. You are awake in a way that sleep cannot offer. The final chant concludes just before sunrise. You bow low. The brazier is extinguished with sand. The room goes silent. And your voice? It still rings in your ears, carried forward by sacred habit. It's morning. The fire lives. But you're not sure you do. You haven't blinked in hours. Your throat still echoes the final syllables of the sunrise chant. Your fingers smell permanently of cedar ash and warmed brass. Your knees feel like the floor has been quietly trying to consume them, and yet as the first rays of sunlight thread their way through the high eastern slats of the fire temple, you're still upright, still alert, still breathing, barely. The priests begin to stir again, moving with the same practiced, unhurried precision that made you feel like a confused houseguest your first night here. But now you notice things. How one priest adjusts his sash so the edge lines up perfectly with the side of his foot. How another, without looking, realigns the altar basin 2 degrees clockwise to follow the new shadow line on the floor. The rituals aren't just being performed, they're lived. And you? You're starting to mirror them. You're no longer a flailing outsider tripping over incense trays and dodging the sandal like a fire-dodging mouse. You glide now, quietly. Maybe not perfectly, but close. Today's tasks are simpler, symbolic, a kind of gentle descent after the marathon of ritual intensity. You're given a brush and a folded cloth. Your job? Dust the outer stone steps. Not for hygiene, for gratitude. Here's your historical grounding. Post-vigil purification rites often ended with acts of service, performed at the edges of the sacred space. It was a way to reconnect with the physical world while maintaining inner sanctity. Cleaning, sweeping, arranging. These weren't chores. They were offerings, demonstrations that your inner self was now in harmony with your surroundings. So you sweep, lightly, slowly. Every movement is a continuation of the chant. Every bristle stroke a syllable drawn across stone. You pass other initiates. Some wear the same numb, shell-shocked look you must have had hours ago. Others are farther along, faces calm, movements almost choreographed. And then there are the senior priests. Ageless, unreadable, utterly themselves. You nod to one. He nods back. It's nothing, and it's everything. Fringe tidbit? Some fire temples use coloured sand to mark paths of purification around their courtyards. Yellow for sun rituals, blue for night observances, red for the mid-fire. Stepping outside those lines was a spiritual misstep. You haven't seen coloured sand here, but you realise every hallway, every threshold, every corner feels like a border. The lines are invisible now, but you walk them anyway. After cleaning, you're guided to the outer pool. Yes, water. Actual shimmering cold water. Not to drink, of course, but to feel. You kneel beside it, roll up your sleeves and place your hands in the surface. It bites instantly. Ice from the night's air. But it's clean. It's new. You're told to splash it onto your face 3 times, tracing the shape of the sun. Forehead, heart and open palms. The feeling is unreal, not just refreshing, transformational. It's the first time in hours you've felt a sensation that didn't involve heat, ash or pressure. And here's your scholarly debate for the day. Historians still puzzle over whether the extreme demands of Zoroastrian fire temple life were intended for daily use, or were more like spiritual boot camps, ritual reset buttons to be endured occasionally. Some argue the fire temples served both functions, houses of light and also centres of training. Others claim what you've just gone through was reserved for the elite priesthood only. If that's true, you've just lived a day in the life of the sacred few. After your final ablution, a priest leads you to the upper terrace. The sun is fully risen now, casting golden light over the courtyard below. From here, you can see the entire layout of the temple. The outer walls, the central dome, the smoke rising in lazy curls into the brightening sky. The fire continues to burn. It hasn't gone out. Not once. You're allowed a moment to sit, and breathe in open air. No chants, no ash, no sandals, just silence. You close your eyes, not in exhaustion, but in something closer to reverence. Not the big dramatic reverence of statues and stained glass, but a quiet, lived-in kind. The kind you earn by surviving something sacred. You remember the first breath you took inside the sanctum, sharp with sulphur and nerves. The first mistake, the first correction, the endless repetition of purity steps, the invisible rules you slowly learned by heart. You remember the fire's colour, its rhythm, its presence. And now, you still don't fully understand it, but you trust it. You open your eyes again. You're still here. And so is the flame. You crawl outside, blinking at sunlight. You survived, but only technically. The fire temple never really lets you go. The light is too bright, the breeze too free. Everything feels unsupervised. After hours, maybe days, of ritual precision, the outside world seems reckless. There's no ash here, no chanting. People talk too loud, they face the wrong direction. Some even touch food with their left hand, casually. You find yourself standing near the outer wall, a few feet from the main gate, reluctant to step beyond it. Your robe is still marked with streaks of sacred ash. Your hands smell faintly of resin and humility. The hammer seed from your confession is still tucked into your sash. And in your ears, the whisper of chants you thought you'd forget but haven't. A priest approaches, not the high-ranking ones, just a mid-level initiate. His eyes are kind. He hands you something, a folded cloth packet tied with flax twine. You open it. Inside, a single flake of sanctified firewood, burnt at the edge, its grain blackened, a keepsake, a fragment of the flame. It's not for burning, it's for remembering. No words are spoken. He bows. You bow back. It's understood. Here's your final historical anchor. Those who completed extended purification vigils in Zoroastrian temples were often marked, not physically, but ritually. Some were invited back to serve. Others carried sacred tokens as proof of their passage. A few became teachers themselves. But all were changed. And fringe fact to close, Zoroastrians believed the true test of purity wasn't in the temple, it was after it. Could you carry the sacred fire in your thoughts when no one was watching? Could you maintain order in a disordered world? The flame inside you, that was the one that mattered. You step past the gate. The temple vanishes behind a fold in the stone path, but something remains, a stillness in your chest, a flame beneath your ribs, a quiet, vigilant awareness that refuses to dim. You reach a tree, you sit beneath it. Not from fatigue this time, from choice. The breeze moves through your robe. You feel the warmth of the sun and the weight of your own breath. It's yours again, but it's also different, measured, sacred, owned. The fire temple didn't kill you, but it stripped you down, sifted through you, and rebuilt you from ash and breath and rules that now live inside your muscles. You don't look like a priest, but you feel like one. And somewhere in the far-off smoke trail drifting from the temple roof, a sliver of flame still remembers your name. Now let's gently set everything down. Take a slow breath. and let yourself feel the cool air of early morning brushing across your skin, like the soft wake of ritual passing behind you. The ash is gone now. The fire still burns, yes, but it's distant and no longer watching. You're outside its walls, outside its rhythm, but still, somehow, inside its memory. You've endured the silence, the chants, the breath discipline, the sandal. You survived the cold sand at midnight and the warmth of saffron at dawn. You made it through confession and coughing, through fingernail inspections and spiritual geometry. You're clean. Not just in the ritual sense, but in the way that comes after facing something ancient and coming out the other side quieter, steadier and changed. Let the chants fade now. Let the walls dissolve. Let the flame dim just enough to rest. You're no longer kneeling. You're lying back, somewhere soft, somewhere safe, maybe with a fan humming faintly in the corner, and a blanket rising and falling gently with your breath. The temple is far away, but the silence it taught you, the deep kind, the kind that holds without weight, that silence, you can keep it. So as your eyes begin to close and your thoughts begin to blur into dream shapes, know that the fire still burns, and maybe a part of it now burns in you. Sleep well, sweet dreams, 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 sweet dreams.